Welcome to the last session of our summer school. Before introducing our last speaker, Alberto Grigio, on behalf of Perennia Verba, I'd like to thank a few people. First of all, we'd like to thank you, the participants. You've been an attentive and lovely audience. And if I'm allowed a linguistic metaphor based on the Arabic script, if we, the speakers and the organizers, have provided the consonant base for this summer school, you have been the harakat, the vowels that gave life to the contents presented, animated the sessions, and in so doing, interpreted what's been presented by relating it to your experience, background, personal interests. Thank you so much for that. Meeting you all has been a great privilege. Thank you to all our speakers. I shall mention all of them in order of appearance. Alberto Ventura, Gregory Van Dam, Steven Irtestein, Pablo Beneto, Patrizia Spallino, Samuela Pagani, Michele Petrone, Paolo Rizzi, Mohammed Rostem, Luca Patrizi, and Alberto Grigio. We'd like to thank them all, and in particular for their generous contribution and for their readiness to share their knowledge with us all and their openness to scientific collaboration. A spirit of cooperation that is reflected in the fact that, as you have certainly noticed, our speakers have frequently worked or are currently working together on various projects, preparing co-authored books, organizing common events, exchanging ideas, insights, sharing rare documents. It is not simply by chance that they have gathered together on these and on other occasions. There is indeed between them an intellectual bond based on what the German poet Goethe would have called elective affinities. We can only hope that their fruitful cooperation will go on in the future, despite the troubled times that we are all living. Once again, we'd like to thank the co-organizer of the event, MIAS UK and Latina, and the Officina di Studi Medievali. For those of you who are conducting research on Sufi studies, Akbarian studies, medieval studies, comparative religious studies at academic level or on a personal base, we do encourage you to get in contact with those institutions for inquiries on their multiple activities and queries related to your own research. They will be more than happy to help you in any possible way. And in this respect, I have to mention a particular praiseworthy initiative by MIAS UK that has established an interdisciplinary research hub where researchers on Arabic studies can share their ideas and illustrate the project that they are working on. Finally, we'd like to thank all those in Perennia Verba who have helped us with the organization of this summer school by working behind the scenes. They are many, and we are thankful to each and every one of them for their contribution. But I'd like to mention only one, Renata Gironi, Paolo Rizzi's wife. She has spared no effort to make all this happen, generously and painstakingly giving her precious contribution on both the theoretical and practical level, and adding to that her unique and gentle aesthetic touch. Thanks to our director, Paolo Rizzi, who is the mind, the inspiration, and the guide behind this summer school. Now back to our speaker. Alberto Grigio is a senior member of Perennia Verba. He holds a PhD in African Studies from the University of Siena and specializes in Sufi studies. But his research interests also includes the history of early Judaism and Christianity, all subjects on which he has published on the Perennia Verba journal. He has several articles there, and please check the Perennia Verba website for further information. Dr. Grigio is also the author of a translation with commentary of Kashani's al-Risala al-Kumairiyya, published within the collection I Gioielli, the Jewels, which is a collection directed by Paolo Rizzi of fundamental Sufi texts, translated for the first time in a Western European language. Well, there's a lot more I could tell you about him, but he has prevented me from doing that. I just want to thank him personally, for he is an unfailing source of information, suggestions, insights, and biographical and bibliographical references. Let's not keep him waiting any longer. The title of his lecture today is The Insân al-kâmil in al-Karîm al-Jîlî. Please, Dr. Grigio.
Thank you, Federico. I'm very grateful to everyone as well. And okay, you have already said everything, so I would skip, as time is a tyrant, as is always said, to the presentation. So let's check, first of all, if it works properly. Okay, is it correct? Great.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you as well for your appreciation, which I don't really deserve, I already told you. And now let's skip to the topic of our presentation, which is, as you can say, the universal man in al-Karîm al-Jîlî. A few words about the author. Al-Jîlî is a relevant member, let's say, of the Akbarian school, but not relevant in the sense that it belongs to the intellectual tradition, intellectual silsila, which linked Ibn Arabi to the earlier exponent of the Akbarian school, for example, Konawi, and then later Jandi, Kayseri, and so on. But in the sense that it has the peculiarity of having exposed the topic of universal man in a very particular way. And I say expose, I don't say present, because in a way, some detail, he was the first to express, to reveal in a very plain way. But before facing directly the subject of our presentation, let's skip to three fundamental quotations. The first from a modern specialist of al-Karîm Jîlî's thought, which says in one of his works that while Jîlî is generally acknowledged to be one of the most influential thinkers in the metaphysical tradition of Ibn Arabi, he has nevertheless received little scholarly attention, particularly in English. So this is the first remark, to the which I can add that, well, that it's a field of research on its own, and the topic itself I'm dealing with should and would deserve a series of lessons in itself, because basically Jîlî has spoken about this subject in different chapters, in different fusul, we can call them chapters or paragraphs, scattered in the majority of his work. Then there is a claim of another specialist who, as well as is a linguistic specialist in Arabic language, and she says, Suad Hakim, that though the concept of al-Insân al-kâmil, as he wrote, both in creation and as a pole of human existence, so just here we have a couple of definitions that we will expound later. Okay, this concept appears within Arabic. It's al-Jîlî who in the history of Sufism have a privileged role in presenting it, this topic. And the same author adds, I must specify, it's always Suad Hakim speaking, that I used the expression privileged role because al-Jîlî was the first to write in a special way of al-Insân al-kâmil in the field of Sufism. All his writings deal more or less with this topic. And then we have Jîlî himself. I use Nicholson translation, a very old but in a way reliable translation, which takes some line from the already quoted al-Insân al-kâmil, where Jîlî himself claims, these are once again Jîlî's words, most of what I've set down in this book of mine has not been set down by anyone before me, as far as I know, nor have I heard an address from anyone about it, as far as I understand. Rather, he, with a capital H, he gave me knowledge of it through witnessing him with the Ain, bil Ain, from which nothing on earth or in heaven is veiled. None of this is known except by way of unveiling, and we witnessed it with our eyes, and this was supported by divine revelations. And later we'll tackle the book, or one at least of the works by Jîlî devoted to his own experiences. We will come to this book later. Then a few words about the author, because I'm not going to provide an extensive biographical approach to Jîlî, but at least it's worth saying that he lived in the medieval Zabid. Zabid was an intellectual capital in that period, let's say in the Middle Ages, of the Yemen. Now it's not very famous as it was in the earlier period. And this is a picture of a mosque. This mosque was built by a companion of the Prophet. It was built in Zabid in Yemen by this companion of the Prophet, who is called Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, and is called al-Ashair, probably by his name. And okay, I cannot give you an historical evidence, of course, that Jîlî attended this mosque, but I think that the prestige and okay, the baraka in Islamic terminology of the place itself attracted many followers, and possibly Jîlî have attended some lessons or some halqa to dhikr in this mosque. So we have al-Karîm al-Jîlî, born 1365 and died in 1811, among many other dates. Why I put between inverted commas among many other dates? Because there is a still ongoing debate on what is exactly the date of his death, which is not really interesting, but if we choose, and I quote the reference, Atlag, who found what seems to be an authentic autograph testimony, a colophon by the son of the author, which states, my father, Abdel-Karîm al-Jîlî, died in Zabid in 811. And then this date is confirmed by a further manuscript. So why is interesting? Not only interesting, but I mean the modern research focus, and in a way has already chosen this date amongst the many others, 826, 828, or even earlier dates, 805, that have been focused on by different other authors. Why? Because if we accept, as I do, and as the most relevant exponent of the literature on Jîlî do, if we accept this, we understand that he died at a very young age. And this is very peculiar for a figure, for a character who was the author of such important works. So just this a prompt that allows us to think to his function. How could a man who died in his early 40s be such a relevant author and express such profound thesis as we're going to be? And I found this poem, which is a well-known poem among Jîlî specialists. It's called the Qasida al-Ayniya, the poem rhyming with Ain, where the author states that he had a deep spiritual inspiration since he was a child. And okay, the line goes, "Since I was a child, His Majesty asked for me, and I denied to myself everything that was exterior." And in the commentary provided by a later Ibn Arabian exponent, a later exponent of the Akbarian school, the already quoted Nablusi by Professor Pagani, for example, in her talk, Nablusi commented this line saying, since he was a child, he asked for the highest, or the high, in a better translation, spiritual degrees, let's say. Okay, so this is the meaning that from the poem is conveyed by Nablusi, which addresses the reader saying, okay, in a few words, that he was an exceptional kind of spiritual figure since his childhood. All right, but if we read carefully what he has written in Arabic, which I highlighted in red, the author Jîlî says, وَمُنْ كُنْتُ طِفْلًا فَالْمَالِ تَطْلُبُونِي. That means, since I was a child, Her Majesty, al-Mali is a sort of catchword, Her Majesty asked for me or sought for me. Is not the same as the commentary that said that Huwa Yatlub. That means that Jîlî himself asked for these degrees. So how can you interpret this when the author itself says that he had a divine call by his Lord? So just the case is in a way exceptional from the very words of the author, and is in a way to be compared to what we have been in this serious lecture has been said about the Jazba, the divine favor who attracts the creature, the servant, to the divine present, before even undertaking all the stages, all the usual stages of on the Sufi path, of the suluk. Not only this, but he also experienced an ascension analogous to Muhammad's Miraj through the heavens, during which he saw all of the messengers and prophets and had revealed to him the realities of things as they have been since pre-eternity and will be forever. Many other chapters, quotations by the author could underline his rank as far as the vision of the prophet was concerned, which he saw at least 2 or 3 times in different modes. But now we are focusing on what I was just a couple of minutes ago describing about the spiritual journey of the author himself, which he exposes in his book called The Manazir, the Divine Contemplations. And this is an introduction, not by the author, but by a commentator, by Zaidan, is an well-known among the scholar interested in literature concerning Jîlî. And Zaidan says that Jîlî's book, so it's not Jîlî, once more speaking, the book itself is a recording, tasjil, of the spiritual journey of al-Jîlî, from its beginning to its end or its apex. Al-Jîlî's spiritual journey is a special journey in a specific realm, in the realm of contemplations, divine contemplations, manazir, all self-disclosures, tajalliyat, through the divine names and attributes. So this translation is mine, so I'm sorry because it's still to be perfected. It hasn't been double-checked. So it's not as reliable as Nicholson translation, but I think that it can be understandable enough to convey the message of the authority who took the charge of introducing this one single work by Jîlî. And then we have the summary of Jîlî's spiritual journey. Very strange thing, apart from number 1, that we will tackle in a minute. Number 3, absclosed self-disclosure, at-tajalli al-itlaq. This is the third, but let's say it's quoted by himself among his first steps in the Sufi path. And then you have the 100th, which is the al-manzir al-mi'iyya, which is the 100th vision, the 100th divine contemplation, kun fayakun, taken from the Quran, which is quite remarkable. Okay, the divine creation, the divine power, the power of divine will. And then we have this 101 al-ajz and dark al-idrak, idrak. Very remarkable. We'll talk about it in a minute. But before, let's check al-fana al-dhati. And then even if I haven't highlighted al-fana fil fana and al-baka, that are the classical degree which are usually placed at the end of the pursuit, okay, at the end of the path towards Allah in classic Sufi literature, here are quoting among the earlier stations, essential extinction, then the extinction, from the extinction and the permanence in Allah or in the divine essence, according to the points of view. Among the first degree, quite remarkable. Now, if we go back once again to the 101, al-ajz in Andark al-idrak, this is a well-known saying by Abu Bakr, the first caliph of the Prophet, and is quoting in Arabic extensively, and especially in the Fusus al-Hikam, in the chapter of Set, by which is defined the supreme knowledge. So the supreme knowledge usually has been defined by Abu Bakr as the incapability, the impossibility to understand. So the saying goes, the incapability to understand is in itself understanding. And Ibn Arabi remarks that not all the men of knowledge used to express the supreme reality in these terms, and so on. There is, of course, a further doctrinal development, but this, what is worth what is worth pointing out here is this supreme station is in a way out from the 100 makamat, the 100 station, which is the usual counting on the station. So we could, at least it's just an idea, we could regard it as a lamakam. And if it's so, we understand that the divine pursuit of Jîlî starts from worshiping God as though you see him, which is the hadith of the divine vision, or better, the vision of the servant from the divine perspective, then the absolute tajalli, the absolute self-disclosure of the essence, and ends with the lamakam. Quite remarkable, if I am correct, if this is a further proof that Jîlî spiritual journey and spiritual case is quite remarkable. So what is the consequence? The consequence, or the most closely related reality. This I have made a list of all the manazir, and if we have time, I will go through them. But I'm saying, what is the consequence that we can draw from that? Okay, the testimony, an ancient testimony, which is a testimony of someone, of a biographer called Ibn al-Ahdal, who was against, first of all, was against all the proponents of the metaphysical vision of the Wahdat al-Wujud, of the unity of being according to the Ibn Arabian or Akbarian school, and particularly to Jîlî. So he regarded Jîlî as a lost soul doomed to hell because he received this testimony. So he said, among those doomed to be lost in the sea of unbelief, very heavy words, is al-Jîlî. Why? Because a reliable scholar told me that he was with Jîlî one of his travels, during which he heard him praising profusely Ibn Arabi's books and teaching. So this person, who was possibly a faqih, because in other sources is quoted as being a faqih, also heard him overtly ascribing lordship, rububiyah, to every human being, bird or tree, which he happened to see on his way. So that should be the final condemn to Jîlî's thought and action. In reality, if we erase the word rububiyah, and if we substitute it with the word huwiyah, which is the present of the essence from a metaphysical point of view, it's all perfectly consistent. So it's another, according to my perception, another proof of the inner state of al-Jîlî, who, far from ascribing lordship, because there is an opposition between lordship and creaturehood or creatureship. There are two opposites, but from the point of view of the divine essence, they are two aspects. So he ascribed 99% huwiyah to every human being, according to what we can grasp about his spiritual realization. And this leads us to a second and final remark before going more deeply in our subject, concerning the science. Okay, this is a page of, let's say, the introductory page. Can you hear me? Is everything fine? all right? This is the introductory page of another work by Jîlî called the one I mentioned before, the Maratib al-Wujud, where we can find the first line, okay, just the first couple of lines. The first thing that the wise take care of, and the noblest thing that the elect spends a lifetime in seeking for, is the science of God. Okay, this is a sort of declaration. أولى ما أتانا به الأقلاء وأعز ما صرف به الأمر في طلبه الفضلاء هو العلم بالله. What is the ilm billah? Science of God is, okay, I translated literally, but I highlighted that is sacred science and metaphysical comprehension of reality. And after this claim, let's say, there is a sort of agenda, a program in just a single page. And this program is very clear. Okay, he states in a single page at least 4 relevant things. The first thing that he says is a consequence of the title itself. The best thing that can be searched for is the sacred science. All right. Then we have at least 2 consequences. The first consequence is as far as the mashaykh or the awliya, it does not specify. It speaks in very broad terms, but says that those who are given this science have obtained it by inspiration, everyone according to his capability. First step. Then, for these reasons, they keep looking for whom is endowed with sacred science. And this is as far as the ukala, let's say, how he calls them, or fudala, which is in a way synonymous. Then there is the second consequence, which concerns directly the disciple. The disciple himself, according to Junaid, that Jîlî quotes, must look for this science. So we see that it's a specific program. And he defined this science as a science that can, in a way, take the souls, even the souls of the beginners, and turn them into beings capable of understanding the ultimate reality. And he gives also some example in the following pages of the book. So let's read. I made long quotations, but I think I skip some lines and I focus on the most relevant lines. It says, I've already seen in our times a large group belonging to every nation, be they Arabs, Persians, Indians, Turks, or others, attain through the reading of books the degree of the initiates. I have seen young men of my brethren on the path, by means of reading such books for even a few days, reach that which man devoted to pious works could not reach in 40 or 50 years, even though they themselves were the cause for this young man to come to the path. Then he quotes some stories and he says that I have only related to you all that precedes in order that you might yearn to attain unto this noble art by reading these books, applying them and discussing them with those who are experts. For a man such as one of them might benefit you with a single word more than all the books in the world could benefit you in an entire lifetime. So this is apparently a contradiction. How can you stress the importance of books and then say at the same time that a man of knowledge might benefit you more than 100 or 1,000 books? Why? Because is he talking about books as such, or is he talking about the doctrine? So this is not a literary approach, but is a doctrinal approach. So it's the doctrine which is in the books that can lead you to the knowledge. And the end of the quotation is, for those of this understanding, of deep understanding, to read books of metaphysics and spiritual realities is superior to the acts of the salikin. But to sit with the folk of God and keep good conduct with them is superior to reading all the books there are. So again, books are important, are extremely important, but if you take the doctrine from the folk of God, you can reach the goal anyway. So the counsel, again, is to see the folk of God, of course, we've seen it, but to keep reading books of metaphysics and spiritual realities. In doing this, you shall achieve your purpose and attain unto knowledge of God. Unto knowledge of God, if he so wills. So this is, in few words, the doctrinal perspective of Jîlî, which is scattered and present in all his works. And now we're talking about the Insân al-kâmil, which is the main book devoted to the doctrine of the perfect man or universal man. We have seen that even from the first lecture by Stephen Hirtenstein, we could call it in different ways. The first translation, okay, by Titus Burckhardt is de l'homme universel, on the universal man, which has been abridged in the title in this English version and has become universal man. While a recent work devoted to the Sufism and the concept of the perfect man in Jîlî, as you can see, is the perfect human. So the main, okay, the importance of the article, I can skip it, of course, because it's not any or a simple specific member of the humankind, of the human species. No, it's a sort of prototype. The article highlight the fact that it's a prototype, al-Insân al-kâmil. But can we translate it? How can we translate it? Man or human? We have seen with Hirtenstein that both translations are possible, but as far as I'm concerned, I tend to use man, and I prefer man, because we will see in a while that the Insân al-kâmil is at the same time various things. First of all, is a hakika, a divine reality or a spiritual reality in the realm of the divine grades. Then is a divine, well, I missed the word in English, a divine prototype. And then as well is the possibility from, not from man, but from man, plural, to realize the degree of the perfect man. So just in this latter case, I would use human, and I prefer to say universal man because of the double meaning, which is rooted in the divine essence, and the meaning as well as a semi-divine celestial prototype, to the which, in my opinion, the term human does not apply in a proper way. But this is my way of understanding the expression. And as well, the title itself, which is, Al-Insân al-kâmil fi ma'rifat al-awahir wal-awali. How can we translate it? So we have two different translations that we will check, but always Suad Hakim, the author that I have quoted previously, said that Jîlî, in this case the author, okay, I better start from the beginning of the quotation. Hakim said, al-Jîlî wrote a book called The Universal Man, on the knowledge of the last and of the first. Its title should make us reflect before the author, that is to say Jîlî, claimed that this book contains the knowledge of the ones who came before. So Jîlî claimed that this book contains the knowledge. Okay. We can also add that al-Jîlî first write the expression knowledge of the last, and then knowledge of the first. And this is not only due to poetry or to poetical exigencies. In Jîlî's opinion, every single thing a seeker would need to know on the topic of al-Insân al-kâmil is included in his book. Okay, so we have to keep in mind that the author claimed that this book contains the knowledge of the ones who came before and the knowledge on the first. And this is the purpose of the book, is to provide doctrine for the one who came later. Okay, so for the knowledge of the last. And so this is why I would translate it in this way: the universal man on the knowledge of the last and of the first, rather than the man perfecting knowledge, because in this case the knowledge should be related to man. The man, al-Insân al-kâmil fil ma'rifa. The knowledge is not the knowledge that is provided by the book, but is the knowledge inside man. Grammarly, we could translate it like this, because we have, for example, I don't know, al-kâmil fi tarikh, okay, the universal history. You can do that, but grounded, very, very remarkable introduction by Hakim states that is the book itself that provides this knowledge. So the universal man is a treatise itself on the knowledge of the last and of the first. And here we have two ways of regarding the core content, of the Insân al-kâmil. While Titus Burkhardt says that Jîlî in the Insân al-kâmil makes a synthesis of all the essential reality of existence, which is true. It's true. From a metaphysical point of view, it's true, because the book starts from the God's essence, and then all the divine degrees, the divine faculties, and the attributes, and so on, until it reaches chapter 60, which is the chapter devoted to al-Insân al-kâmil. It's like a sort of, how could I say, an inverted pyramid. So we have this sort of arrow, okay, and an arrow thrown from the top to the chapter 60, which is the target. But the chapter 60 is the target as such. And this is why always in Nicholson translation, sorry, here we are, always in Nicholson translation. These are Jîlî's way of presenting the chapter, which is the heart of the book. We have seen the chapter is a synthesis of all the essential realities, according to Burckhardt. Yes, it's true from a metaphysical perspective, but is also, as Jîlî himself states, this chapter is the pillar of the other chapters of these books, because the whole books, from its beginning to its end, is an explication of this chapter. Therefore, understand the real meaning of what we are saying. So it's an excellent way and very powerful suggestion to focus on this chapter, chapter 60, as the real McCoy, as the authentic core of the book. What I've done here is to arrange in, let's say, in 2 columns, the basic contents of what can be summarized as the base contents, but these are extensive quotation by Jîlî, always in Nicholson translation, by the chapter 60, comparing to the chapter 50. So we have the universal man, 60, that so far we have seen as being both the synthesis and the pole of the whole book, and we compare it to a previous chapter on the spirit. All right, so let's focus on 60, but keeping in mind the 50th. God created an angel named Ruh, spirit, from his own light, and from him he created the word and made him his organ of vision in the world. He is the noblest and most exalted of existent beings. There is no angel above him. God caused the millstone of existent beings to turn on him and made him the pole of the sphere of created beings. Chapter 60, which reflect as a mirror on a different perspective what has been said in chapter 50. The universal man is the pole, Qutb, on which the spheres of existence revolve from first to last, and since things came into being, he is one forever and ever. Let's follow on. The spirit, Ruh, exercises a divine guardianship created in him by God over the whole universe. He manifests himself in his perfection in the Hakika Muhammadiyah, which is the inner reality of the prophet. Here we have something which is a sort of shift, a shift from the reality, the inner reality of the prophet, and the presence of the prophet as such. So the universal man, this is the title, has various guises and appears in diverse bodily tabernacles. In respect of some of these, his name is given to him, while in respect of others is not given to him. His own original name is Muhammad. His name of honor is Abul Qasim. His description, Abdullah, servant of God, and his title, Shamsuddin, the son of the tradition. In every age, he bears a name suitable to his guise, libas, to his vestment, we could say, in that age. So we have, I said, a shift from the Hakika Muhammadiyah and the presence of Muhammad, but there is another thing added. Here it is. I once met him in the form of my sheikh, although I knew that he was the sheikh. Sorry, I skipped 2 relevant lines. I once met him in the form of my sheikh, Sharafuddin Ismail al-Jabati, but I did not know he was the prophet. although I knew that he was the Sheikh. The real meaning of this matter is that the prophet has the power of assuming every form. When the adept sees him in the form of Muhammad, which he wore during his life, he names him by that name. But when he sees him in another form and knows him to be Muhammad, he names him by the name of the form in which he appears. So here we have the first, let's call, declaration of the idea that there can be many universal man, okay, apart from the universal man. That is degree, it is a degree attainable, but different saints. And the prophet, in a very personal way, he says, the prophet appears in them. Then again, back to the, and I highlight this quotation, this line in green, underline that they are related to the terrestrial side, to the earthly side of the Insân al-kâmil. And then we have another side. No, sorry. Here we are. While God manifests himself in his attributes to all other created beings, he manifests himself in his essence to this divine consciousness, which is his origin. So here, as a spirit is a reflection of the essence, and the same reality as universal man, there is no such difference, is a copy, nuskha of God, and is a mirror of God. Okay, there is, even in this case, an astonishing parallel. And this, the same way I highlighted in red, in green, let's say the earthly side, the earthly facet of the universal man. Here I have done the same thing, but in blue, let's say in light blue, the heavenly side of the universal man. Because beyond the plane of the names and attributes, he, the universal means, is independent of his modes, i.e. names and attributes, and regards them not at all. He knows nothing in existence save his own nature. Here it could be his own nature, or with the H, this is always Nicholson translation, O, capital H, his, the essence nature, the huwiyah, to that to which we alluded before, and beholds the many in his essence. Okay, essence with little e. So the essence is not more the divine essence. In this case, is the essence of the universal man. And so we have the different levels, all right? So the level of the divine presence, or the level of the divine reality, is that the Supreme Spirit is created from the light of God. It is the manifestation of the essence, and it manifests its perfection in the Hakika Muhammadiyah. The universal man is a copy of God, a mirror to God, and beholds the many in his essence. Then the universal man, which beholds the many in his essence, has various guises and appears in diverse bodily tabernacles. So let's summarize everything as a semi-divine, how the literati call it. I would call it a hakika level, a level which is in the divine reality, because the Supreme Spirit is created from the light of God. Then we have an intermediation level, a prototypical level, where the universal man, which is not very different from the Spirit, is a copy and a mirror of God. And then from this comes the earthly possibility of manifestation, the possibility of reaching the degree of universal man through various guises and various bodily forms by the awliya who realize the station of the perfect man. I know that is a bit synthesized, but I try my best to convey the message of a very thick and dense chapter comparing to the other chapter, and I hope that everything is understandable. If not, I will be happy to answer in the Q&A section. Here we have a page always of the Maratib al-Wujud that I quoted before. And in this page, we have at least, this is the actual page, we have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different names that are given, denomination, to the Insân al-kâmil. Okay, Insân al-kâmil as such is never mentioned. By it's speaking, the author is speaking about the degree of the Insân al-kâmil. So the Insân al-kâmil is the first intellect, al-kalam, al-aql al-awwal, the supreme kalam, al-kalam al-ala, the Muhammadian spirit, the ruh nabika, the ruh of your prophet, the nur Muhammadi, the light of the prophet, the universal soul, an-nafs al-kulli. And to say the truth, we can even quote many others. For example, the Emir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, who was a later exponent of Ibn Arabian school, in a chapter devoted to the Hakika Muhammadiyah, the inner reality or the supreme reality of the Prophet, quotes none less that I think 40, if not 99 or 100, but at least 40 different names of the Insân al-kâmil / Hakika Muhammadiyah. So even if we can separate its levels, okay, according to the perspective, basically the reality is one. But we've been focusing so far, okay, on these three aspects: the Hakika, supreme reality aspect, okay, the prototypical aspect, and the earthly or saintly aspect that can be perceived in many bodily forms, all right, quoting the author. What is missing is another aspect that Jîlî deals with in another book. This book is called Al-Kamalat al-Ilahiyya, and the aspect which is missing is the intermediation, which comes naturally because, of course, if we have the divine level and the saintly or earthly level, amongst the two we have this prototype, which in a way is an intermediate reality, is also called the barzakh. But here in this book, which has been wonderfully translated in Italian, and I tried to retranslate it in English with providing my own translation. This book is specifically devoted to highlight the is the aspect of the intermediation. So the first chapter goes directly, straightforwardly, on the knowledge that Muhammad is the mediator between God and the servant. And then, after a second chapter devoted on the knowledge of the 9 names and attributes, there is the third chapter, which shows how Muhammad has been and is still characterized by divine's name and attributes. So either we start from the first or we start from the third. It depends on the perspective. We can say he's being characterized by so and so, so he is a mediator, or you can say he is the mediator. Why? Because now I'm going to show the reader that he's being characterized by such and such divine name and attributes. And then the fourth chapter, which, to say the truth, I haven't gone through so far, I haven't read it, shows how to attain these divine qualities. And we'll skip it for the moment. We have statements that underlines how and in which way Muhammad is the universal mediator. Now we talk about Muhammad, but Muhammad is no more the historical prophet. Okay, he is, but this is reality. So we see that Muhammad's reality is the first expression. Then we have Muhammad's spirit, that is the second expression. So let's go through it. Muhammad's reality embraces everything that is part of created and uncreated reality. Muhammad's reality is the general mercy through which divine mercy acts on the reality of all things. So it's related to the hadith, the very famous hadith that Muhammad is a mercy for the worlds, for the creatures. Then, from the spirit of Muhammad, he created the throne, the stool, and the remaining higher and lower realities in order to receive God's mercy. They proceed from his noble constitution and have been drawn from his sublime form. And this is now the metaphysical explanation, because Jîlî says that Muhammad is the theophany of the essence. God has created the beloved, who is the prophet, and has favored him by granting him the theophanies of his essence. Now, a very strong comparison. As the attributes originate from the essence, so the word proceeds from the beloved, and he is therefore the intermediary between God and the word. If there were not his intermediation, beings would not exist. And then we have the perfection, al-kâmil. This is an hadith, and at the end of this hadith, there is the saying, the divine saying by God himself, I have never done this for anyone else before. Know that the prophet is most perfect, the most excellent and noblest of created beings, because he has been created from the light of the divine essence. On the other hand, all the rest of the creatures of the world has been created through the lights of the names and attributes. For this reason, he is the first created being. And this is the reason, as being the first of the creating being, this is how Jîlî highlights his ontological priority. Because as the essence is prior the divine attributes, so the prophet, who is a reflex of the essence, is prior the divine is prior the other creatures. We are derived from him or from his essence. So therefore, as the essence comes before the attributes, then the locus of manifestation of the essence precedes the manifestation of the attributes, as himself, the prophet, reported in the famous tradition narrated by Jabir. The first thing that Allah created is the spirit of your prophet, then from it he created the throne, and from this he created the world. According to this tradition, the manifestation is arranged in different degrees. The secret is that the essence logically precedes the attributes. Therefore, the prophet precedes the other beings as far as his status is concerned, because he is pure essence. I want to remark that in this last line, he doesn't say, as we could easily expect, because he is derived from the essence, because he's derived, is created, he comes from the very nature of the essence. No, no, he says he is pure essence. And we know that some author went even further and used the term Adat al-Muhammadi. So the question is, Adat al-Muhammadi, is it written in capital letter as a degree of the essence, or shall we write it with a little e, essence as usual? It depends on the perspective. But it's worth noting that an author as Jîlî says, because he is pure essence. Does not say he is the essence as such, of course, but says he is pure essence. So, what's missing to this frame in a few words? Because I've been talking about this topic for, I think, an hour more or less. We have seen that in the Insân al-kâmil, according to the science, the perspective, doctrinal perspective, perspective which is grounded on divine science, on sacred or metaphysical science. He distinguished some level, or I tried to synthesize, presenting to the listeners these three levels, which are present in this work. What was missing so far was the explicit statement of the function of intermediation of the prophet. And then a question can rise: how? And the question has been raised during the summer school. Someone asked, but how can people do, or how can we do? I cannot remember exactly. But now we skip from, we directly jump from a metaphysical perspective, which is typical of the Akbarian school, of the Ibnarian school, to an initiatic perspective, initiatory perspective. And this perspective is something really unusual. We will see in a while that in unpublished and let's say lost word, which fortunately I'm not going to bore you on how has been retrieved, who has been able to insert it in his book. This can be this can be a matter of further quotation of questions, but there is still to be published in his integrality work of Jîlî, which has been lost so far. Many of his parts have been lost, but some chapters has been retrieved in this century, and a study by Claude Addas, which has been published on the website, and I think as well on the journal of the Muhammad Islamic Society deal with this topic. Okay, to summarize, this topic is connected to one of the so far lost works of al-Jîlî, called Qab Qawsayn, and particularly a couple of chapters in this quote are devoted to the question how. So the question is on how to attach to him and stand at his door. في كيفية التعلق بجنابه والوقوف على بابه. Okay. So how to attach oneself to the presence of the Prophet, how to get profit from the figure of the supreme mediator. So first there is a doctrinal introduction by the author, by Jîlî. In both pre-eternity and sempiternity, there is no intermediary or mediator, wasila or wasita, or cause for your existence, and as well for the existence of all which is good for you and from every other being, but him, which is to say the Prophet. So he's speaking about the Prophet, but the idea is the reality of the Prophet. We are going to see in a while. So there is no more difference. Insân al-kâmil, haqiqa Muhammadiyya, universal mediation, Prophet Muhammad as such, Adhat al-Muhammadiyya. We can say the entity, the Muhammadian entity, or the Muhammadian essence. So the first thing is that you attach yourself to him and stand at his door. At-ta'alluq bijinabihi. We have several kinds of attachment, of ta'alluq, which are mentioned by Jîlî. And basically, they can be summarized in two. And Claude Hadas has quoted these two different modalities, but I will provide some more translations, apart from what she has already translated, which indicates exactly the modality of this attaching oneself to the Prophet / spirit of the Prophet. So the first is ta'alluq suri, the attachment to his form. So a way of attaching to his form is to follow it with the power, of your love, so that you will find the taste of your love for him in your whole existence. Then comes a sort of testimony by Jîlî himself. I testify that I do find my love for him in my heart, in my spirit, in my body, in my hair, and in my flesh. And in a different page, he repeats and he says, I testify that I am the writer of this page, that I am Abdel-Karim al-Jîlî, and that I find his presence in my body like I find the refreshing presence of water after a very hot temperature. He repeats this idea in a very powerful and convincing manner. Then we have two kinds of attachment to the inner reality of the Prophet. The first is the continuous recalling to your mind of his image. I translated recalling to your mind istighdar. We can always say to evoke, to conjure, but it's more, it gives me the meaning of evoking spirits in other improper ways. So this is an intellectual and spiritual and also practical way. So I would say call to your mind is a continuous calling to your mind of his image. If you have seen him while you were sleeping, then visualize the image that you have seen. If you have not, or you cannot recall exactly the same image that you've seen, then pray on him. And when you mention him, and this is very strong, the last two lines are very strong, when you mention him, be in your inner condition as if you were in front of him when he was alive. So it's no difference, all right? It's the man, but it's the spirit, is the entity. It's a degree. Does not make difference if it is alive or death, not at all. And this is quite remarkable. Then we have the second step, which is the recalling of his universal reality, which is endowed with the quality of perfection, which comprehends any kind of principle, or maybe principial, but I don't know. I haven't found it in English. So let's say principle for the moment, and creatural perfection, until you understand that is the universal limit, who stands between the reality of the eternal being and the reality of the contingent being. He is the reality of both in his essence and qualities, because he's been created from the light of the essence. This is the first time I leave in translation the Arabic original, because I think that this page is a masterpiece. Yes, is a masterpiece. And you see how deep is in the definition, and how this definition recall, as far as talking about recalling his reality, I use once more the term recall the doctrine that has been exposed so far. So the quality of perfection of the prophet, kamal, like, okay, al-kâmil al-Insân, the Insân al-kâmil. What is this degree? Is the universal limit, the prototype, or the barzakh, al-barzakh al-kulli, which stands between the haqq and the khalq, about the divine reality, haqqi, and the created reality, khalqi. And now the final and striking comparison, because is in the definition of his reality, Jîlî employs the term that and sifat. Okay, we have that. I used that with a little d, because that is the essence. So also, not only the essence is an essence with capital letter, which has attributes, but the reality in self of the prophet is an essence with qualities. Why? Because it's been created from the light of the essence with the capital E. The parallelism and the proportion are perfectly consistent. And now, I think that is among, if not the last, we'll reach almost the, it is one of the last images I'm going to show you. We have a book, okay, a page of the manuscript, all right? This manuscript, I don't know if you see my mouse under the title. Anyway, if not, it's the second line. I can understand if you can see it on your screen, but anyway, you do, all right, perfect. So I underline the second, the black line, where I read, okay, let's start from the first. It's not useful to summarize. It's Kitab al-Nafahat al-Ilahiyya, so the book of divine inspirations, fi suluk kayfiyat at-tariqat al-Muhammadiyya, on the spiritual path according to the Muhammadian way. This is the title of the manuscript. and I put in between inverted commas the title of the treatise we have been dealing with so far. So, on how to attach him, al-ta'alluq bihi, okay, on how to attach to him and stand at his door. There is, the meaning, the instructions are more or less the same, okay. The spiritual path according to the Muhammadan path, and how to attach to the Muhammadan reality, and eventually knocking at this door. But there is something that must be added. This is not by al-Jîlî, okay? Al-Jîlî is not the author, and the author is someone else, not really well known, I suppose, to the majority of the listeners. The author is Muhammad al-Karîm as-Samman, not very well known, but quite remarkable, because I'm going, okay, I've already done it. I've summarized his life here in at least 3 or 4 relevant issues. So Samman, born in Medina to a Quraishi family, was the guardian of the Prophet's grave, which is an honor in itself and a symbol if this honor is bestowed on a Sufi sheikh like Samman was. Okay, then he lived in the historic house of Abu Bakr, the first caliph of the Prophet. So another symbol of a sheikh, Sufi sheikh, who lived in the house of Abu Bakr, who was the caliph. So we think that maybe the sheikh himself was a caliph, of course, from an esoteric point of view. He was founder of a tariqa, which took his name, but he belonged to more than one tariqa. When he listed his affiliation, at least he was member of 2, maybe more Turk. And then he was the Pole, not to mention the fact that he was the Qutb of his time, as he himself stated, "My popularity is widespread among people. I am the Pole of his time and forever." So it's very important that Samman quotes this text almost verbatim, okay? It's not the manuscript that I've shown you before, but it's another text called At-Tawajjuhat al-Ruhiyya, where he quotes word by word and sentence by sentence some relevant parts of the work Qab Qawsayn, which is the latest which I have presented as far as the way of ta'alluq, the way to attach to the Prophet is concerned. And the important thing is that he quotes Jîlî. Why is it important? Because in these manuscripts, we have a link, a connection between the Akbarian school and the Tariqa Muhammadiyya. Okay, the Tariqa Muhammadiyya, which was we have been talking about the Tariqa Muhammadiyya during this series lecture, which was the particular form, shade of spirituality in Sufism devoted to focus one's practice, one's attention on the intermediation of the Prophet. So we have an author like Jîlî that, even being a metaphysics, dealt with this topic within the Akbarian tradition. And we have an exponent, a very important exponent of Tariqa Muhammadiyya, because he was the pupil, the student of shuyukh like, for example, Mustafa al-Bakri and al-Hifni, that were the renewer of the Tariqa Khalwatiyya in Egypt. And in Medina, he was closely associated to the silsila we originally was originated by Sha'rani through Kushashi and eventually Qurani until then we had two branches until it came into Shuyukh of the Tariqa Qadiriyya, which probably transmitted this way of practicing, this way of ta'alluq as well. So this is a very, very important link, because if we think that the Akbarian perspective, the Ibn Arabian school, is like the metaphysical side of the Islamic, of the Sufi science, then we have the intermediary sides represented by the Tariqa Muhammadiyya. It's like we had in the origin of Islam, we had the Shahada with these two parts, right? The metaphysical parts, La ilaha illallah, and then the part which is in a way the return to God through the Prophet, and from God the return to the creatures always through the Prophet. So we have these two bows, okay, Qab Qawsayn, these two bows which are linking together and parallels in a way. And the figure of Jîlî, according to me, is very important because it's the link, the connection between these two major trends of Islamic spirituality within the Tasawwuf. So to summarize, his importance is of Jîlî and of Jîlî's work generally is because he underlined the, let's call it haqiqi, the metaphysical, the side of the Insân al-kâmil connected to the divine reality, and as well was the first, as far as I know, at least in the Ibn Arabian school, to provide a link to the ta'alluq, to the attachment and to the Prophet, to the reality of the Prophet, as later will be developed in the Tariqa Muhammadiyya. And I would like to conclude my presentation showing how Burkhardt, who was the first to translate al-Insân al-kâmil, drove the attention of the reader on this two dimension of the Insân al-kâmil in the late 50s. So he was a pioneer. He said, universal man is not really distinct from God. It's like the face of God in his creatures. By union with him, the spirit unites with God. Now, God is all at the same time above it, is all, and at the same time above all, is at once immanent and transcendent. Equally, the spirit in this state of union is united to creatures in their essences by a direct intuition. But, as well, we have to remark that in a way we have proven, as far as I could, of course, because I already said that this topic would require in itself, as such, a further series of lectures of a week, which we cannot provide, of course, at the moment. But the idea of universal man, before everything else, arises from a perspective closely related to spiritual realization, of which he will be the permanent model. For the contemplative Muslim, he is also the universal mediator, and is manifested more directly in the person of the Prophet Muhammad. It took me quite, I suppose, a long time as such, and for the listeners as well. So I am grateful to everybody who made the effort in listening this lecture, and thank you very much.